next story that we're going to be talking about is, well, I don't know whether this was so much an enemy. They became an enemy. Well, they were kind of in at that time, but maybe it was an enemy of society or of humankind, as Elon Musk mentions it. But Elon just recently, about a week or so ago, did this interview with Joe Rogan. Very long interview, but actually I think that Stephen Crowder did a good kind of review of it, and then also added in some context with a lot of things. But one thing that that Elon Musk was talking about is like Twitter almost became this enemy of humanity, because they were so controlled by the government and forcing fake news and trying to push a particular agenda, that it actually negatively affected. He says, look, you can actually tell around. He said it's like, what did he didn't use the word zombie apocalypse, but I interpreted it as something like that. That if you look around the headquarters and everything like that, everything around there is just, you can see it's had such a negative effect. This negative perspective or whatever that they had of that. And so what did Elon Musk do to his enemies? He bought them. He bought them out. Now, I know this is an old story, but it was actually a rehash from this recent interview that I thought that was actually quite interesting. That the perspective that he had is like, for me to overcome my enemies, I just buy them out. Now, I know that's not possible for most people, but I thought this was kind of a little bit motivating and a good motivation, because I know, Dr. Rod, you're heavily involved with businesses' mission, and we talk about that businesses are our ministries and everything like that, and I think that this is kind of pushes that narrative of, this is the reason why good leaders, good Christian leaders, need to build successful organizations, so that we do have the funding that we can. If we have any enemies, just buy them out. Like if you've got enemies, like, could you imagine if you're running a business and there is an enemy down the road that is spreading bad rumors about you, that is they're your competition and everything like that, and they're spreading bad rumors, they're stealing your clients. Could you imagine how easy it would be to just buy them out? And this is kind of like a real encouragement of, like, you need to build a successful business so that you can go and buy out your enemies. Dr.
Oh, absolutely. Build a business so big you can buy Anheuser-Busch and Target all on the same day. Look, it's not an option for most of us, but look, if you're an Elon Musk and you feel very strongly about free speech, as he certainly does, and you're in a position, then go and do it. Now, of course, there was a period during which he was very reluctant to actually go through with that purchase, and I'm pretty certain that when he actually did purchase the platform, it was only worth about half as much as he paid. So he's certainly got a big challenge ahead of him. But I think, well, it's now called X, of course. It has changed because they're not deplatforming conservatives anymore. I think there's a lot of cultural change that we still need to see, because I know that conservatives still receive a lot of very hateful responses. In fact, I very rarely read responses to anything that conservatives put up on X, because 97% of them are negative, and in fact, many of them are actually quite hateful. But good on Elon Musk for not censoring those. I think, free speech cuts both ways. And we've got to be strong enough to understand that if we go public with our ideas, there might be a hateful response. That's something we have to live with, I think, if we believe in free speech. It's the old sticks and stones might break my bones, but names will never hurt me. My mother drummed that into me when I was a small child, because she was basically saying, when people call you names, and of course small children always do, don't retaliate. Don't let it get under your skin. And so I think we've got to grow up I think, and actually champion the idea of free speech. And sure, if you see a business behaving badly, and you're in a position to actually change it by buying it, pray about it first, and if you get the green light, then go ahead by all means, because ownership of a business means you've got the upper hand when it comes to changing the culture. And you don't necessarily need to own 100% of a business, by the way. I did meet a businessman who was a business as mission practitioner in a country that basically locks up Christians. He said to me, you need to hold about 20% of a business in order to be able to influence the culture of the business. And he was someone who was in business, and I think he had about 21% of the shares of that particular company. So you don't necessarily need to actually own a business outright to have an influence, but you need to have a big enough holding to be able to wield some influence. But, it's a good way to go. And there are certainly in America, there are lots of private Christian-owned companies that are large and successful, and it might be something for them to consider. But for people like you and me, right now, not a possibility, but there's nothing wrong with aspiring to be able to shift culture through buying businesses. It's a great strategy, and one of many, of course, but it's a great strategy.
There's one thing that you mentioned about, like, you don't like reading the responses and stuff like that, and we need to just be aware that they're going to happen. So one thing that there was a quote that Elon said during this interview said that Twitter or X should be the collective consciousness of humanity, and I think that's important for us. Going on what you're saying, is important for us to know is, like, everyone has the right to have an opinion. Everyone has a right to share their thoughts. I think we can get too caught up in, this is the challenge. You talk about free speech, but you only want your speech. You just want your opinions to be free, and then no one else should be able to say something. Well, I think that we as leaders need to, like you said, grow up. A very Australian colloquialism is like, have a teaspoon of cement, right? Like, just harden up, right? Because you as leaders, we're going to get attacked and we're going to have enemies. And so we need to be hardened to that a little bit and just be aware that that is life, and we shouldn't use it. We shouldn't shy away from it. But like Patrick McDavid was saying, we should use that as fuel. We should use that to drive us. I want to just, for a moment, we've mentioned this a few times, I just want to give you a bit of a platform for a second, Dr. Rod. You are involved in this organization called Business as Mission. Tell us a little bit more about that, and like how can, like, if someone's interested, like, how do they get involved? Like, what is it? What does it do? Like what, I know that you're involved. Let's share.
Well, look, it's really a movement. It's a movement that was established originally, I guess, by evangelicals. And what it's really about is establishing businesses in countries that are the least evangelized and the poorest countries in the world. And it's using those businesses in order to live out the gospel of Jesus. And of course, in that process, you will convince others that they should give their lives to the Lord as well. So it is evangelical in that sense, but it's about building businesses that are profitable in their own right and that are conscious of a spiritual bottom line. So yes, they need to make a profit in order to be sustainable. They need to care about the people in their business, the people in the community around about them, the people who regulate them, and importantly and unusually, they need to care about their competitors as well. They need also to be considerate of the planet, so they need to recognise that their business activities might have impacts on the natural environment and take that into account and do what they can to mitigate their impact on the natural environment. And then also, in terms of the spiritual bottom line, what's happening in terms of people coming into that saving relationship with Jesus Christ and flourishing as human beings. I think one of the great things about business's mission is, you see, when someone gets involved as an employee, for example, they begin to understand that it's okay to have aspirations for a better future. And there are many, many worldviews which really, they kind of suppress and oppress people because they lead to the idea that wherever I am today, I cannot hope to become any better. And I think that that's one of the dreadful things about this scourge of cultural Marxism, the idea that there's this oppressed class. Because if you're in the oppressed class, you've got no hope of getting out, unless, of course, you pick up your arms and revolt against the ones who you've been led to believe are oppressors. But this idea that someone belongs to an oppressed class and cannot succeed, it's an absolute lie that comes from the pit of hell. I believe that business's mission is spreading something quite different, which is the idea that, you know what, I can actually aspire to no longer be a prisoner of poverty. I can have a meaningful, paid position in a business where I'm genuinely treated as if I have the same value as every other human being on the planet. And our value, of course, arises because God is the one who created us and God loves us.
Yeah.
And look, business's mission, the ideas of business of mission, they've crept well outside the boundaries of the least evangelized and poorest countries of the world. I know many people who practice the principles of business as mission, and they are absolutely wonderful people. Look, when America withdrew from Afghanistan, there were literally hundreds of business as mission operations where the owners said, we want to stay despite the dangers and despite the deprivations. They said, no, God has called us to stay here because we're here for the benefit of the people. Same thing in places like Russia and Ukraine. And, one of the greatest challenges for business as mission practitioners in those countries is, how do I respond when my brother is now, at least on an official level, my enemy?
Yeah.
Well, we respond with love. So, yes, I've been fairly heavily involved with business as mission. It's one of the great passions of my life, as is Kingdom Initiatives and the All Shall Prosper movement, which I think I actually would go so far as to say these actually offer a way out of the decline in Western civilization. And I know that sounds like a very, very bold claim, but, I watched a lot of the videos that came from the ARC conference last week, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to touch on that a little later in our podcast when we talk about Mike Johnson, the newly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States. But I actually think, and see, look, as soon as you offer, if you like, Christian solutions, people write you off as someone who's, you're a far right activist and it's all a load of what we call in Australia codswallop, et cetera, et cetera. It's
Bible
not
bashing.
The claims are not true, et cetera, et cetera. But the principle that every single human being has value, that's the most radical idea ever introduced into human thought. It came from the early Christians. The idea that ambition, aspiration is a good thing, the desire to flourish, the desire to be in a better position next year than you are today, that's a uniquely Christian idea. And look, that's the idea that's rid the world of much of its poverty. And it's taken a long time to get here, of course, but these ideas are really important. And often they're unexpressed, but you can observe the ideas or the thinking of people by the way in which they behave. And one of the reasons why, I put so much effort into this podcast, because it takes me a full day of preparation and actually recording the podcast, is I agree with you. There need to be a few people whose ambition it is to rid the world of poor leadership, because the world will be a better place with better leadership. Leaders who are not looking for their own self-interest, but who are looking for the betterment of those around them or those that they touch by their business activities or whatever activity they happen to be involved in. So yes, I'm a passionate believer in the principles of business's mission and kingdom initiatives as well. And in fact, the reason why I gave up full-time paid employment in 2020 was, one, so I could become a better pastor, and two, so I could spend more time pursuing business's mission and kingdom initiatives. Those are the three things that really drive my purpose on earth at the moment.
That's great. And these things that Dr. Ross is talking about, we'll chuck links. They're not down there at the moment, but Yash, if you can remind us, we'll put the links to those if you want to find more about those organizations, kingdom initiatives, and business mission. There's one other you mentioned. No, that's kingdom initiatives.
ASP, All Shall Prosper, is really kingdom initiatives. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the very simple idea there is every time you engage in a business transaction, you figure out a way to enable everybody involved or affected by that transaction to prosper, to be better off than they were before the transaction took place. Some people characterise it very simply as you make sure you leave something on the table for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So we'll put links to those below and everything, but back to our topic of how do leaders control their enemies? Build successful businesses so that you can just buy them out. That's the best way to control them, as demonstrated by Elon Musk. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.